now. So just settling into your meditation posture. Uh, I do get some joy just seeing all these faces, even in these little boxes. And so I'm going to close my eyes though, and just starting by bringing awareness to your posture and your body, how you're holding your body first, and then what energies are in your body, what feelings are in your body, what sensations. Mhm. There's a way in which any period of meditation in the beginning is it's kind of an act of faith. Um, and of course, if we've practiced a lot, we know something's going to happen. But and when we start out, it might not feel like anything is going to happen or that it's going to be possible to get from here to there, wherever there is. So, in a way, we start by acting as if we're meditating, sitting in the right posture, and then starting to bring attention to the breath. People who first come into a meditation hall can get this idea that, oh, these people are also serene and peaceful, not understanding that what's going on in people's minds isn't necessarily reflected in their quiet and still posture. Just letting the body settle, having a sense of releasing any tension, and anything that isn't released can just be met with kindness, with acceptance. A vital part of our practice is coming to a place where we don't need things to change, where it's okay if things are the way they are. And of course, that very acceptance has the effect of tending to change things. There, of course, is the vital question of whether we're trying to bargain. If I if I'm accepting, then I'll feel better, right? Okay, I'll accept. And that kind of bargain, of course, is just another form of craving, another attachment, an expectation. But when we can truly let go of a need for things to change, we can just be with things as they are. That almost by definition is peace. it can still be unpleasant in some way or challenging. But we find that even that doesn't mean that there can be no peace. So, a really good question to ask yourself in meditation is, what am I not accepting right now? And in order to accept something, we have to see it. So there needs to be that mindfulness. And it's so interesting the games that the mind plays to hide our sort of resistance or craving from us. We find ourselves acting the innocent. I'm really not. I'm really not trying. I'm really not craving. Why isn't this working? Of course, the question answers itself. Now, these are the subtle realms of attachment that we try to penetrate. And we breathe into these experiences, find deeper ways to let go. There are different cues that let us know that we're clinging. Sometimes the cues are in the body and a sensation like restlessness, or there can be an emotional cue, kind of sadness or anxiety, or anger, or a mental cue with thoughts that keep spinning. And oftentimes, when one of these appears, if we look closely, we realize it's actually, maybe covering up or being triggered by some deeper form of clinging or aversion. And deeper doesn't necessarily mean something psychological, but just maybe more subtle. This story that kind of we accept as reality, or a habitual feeling that arises that we just hop on, go with, unthinking. So even as we use the simplicity of the breath to ground us in the present moment, we kind of keep an eye out for those things we call distractions that are telling us something's going on. This doesn't mean we have to go looking for trouble in our meditation, but it's just helpful to understand that there can be these tendencies. And when we start to feel that we're struggling or frustrated in our practice, to apply this kind of attention to the layered elements of clinging, aversion. Well, after saying we were going to meditate for 20 minutes, I kind of forgot to check the time we started. So I don't know what that was. It was something like 20 minutes. And I wanted to just comment on my instruction, because this has been going on for a year, and I've never taught this many classes, like just week after week. Uh, I've gotten out of teaching like what I would call my standard sort of introductory approach to meditation. Sometimes I do it, and sometimes I don't. And so there's kind of a free form that's starting to happen in my guided meditation. And it's sort of because so many of you are with me so often, I kind of feel like I want to, play a little bit and kind of take you into some other little realms. So I hope that's helpful, but particularly if you're new to meditation, I'm hoping it's not confusing or that you maybe find someone else to help you get the basics here, because I don't know, because I've just gotten into the habit of kind of just doing what I feel in the moment, which sounds good. It sounds like what what a meditation teacher should do, but I don't know. Naturally, I'm like other human beings. Sometimes I question my execution of life. So we've been, you know, as most of you know, working with my book, One Breath at a Time, Buddhism and the 12 Steps, for a little over a year now. And we made it into step 7. And step 7 says that we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings, him being God, spelled with capital H. And, a step that's, in those literal terms, quite different from any kind of Buddhist approach. And yet it points to something fundamental about Buddhism, which is about letting go of, destructive qualities. In the language of the steps, it's the shortcomings and character defects. In Buddhism, you might just say the 5 hindrances, or grasping, or greed, hatred, and delusion. I don't think it's, um, I don't know. I don't mind the language of the steps because I guess I'm so used to it. But uh, and and I think one of the things we need to do is not get into a fight with the language, but really ask ourselves what it's pointing to that's meaningful for us. Because I do think that the process that the steps are pointing to is a is it's really a process that happens in any spiritual growth. It's just described in a certain language of 1930s American Protestantism, just like a little bit different from uh, 2021's American, whatever we call our religiousness these days. Um, So, so as I say, I see step 7 as being essentially about letting go and about how do we let go, which I think is really one of the essential questions of all spiritual practice, certainly of Buddhism, and certainly of recovery. We come into recovery with really a burden, not just of an addiction, but of these underlying uh, qualities, which sometimes are trauma based, sometimes they are, you know, mental health, maybe the depression and anxiety and and all the complicating factors. So that quitting the addictive behavior with the first step is only the beginning of sort of the layered process of letting go, and which is one of the reasons why step 7 is one we return to over and over, because as we do this work, more and more layers are sort of revealed. It's the proverbial onion, uh, layers of the onion. So the part of the book that we've been in uh, that I'm still in is called "Don't Overdo It," and it's a response to the previous section that was called "A Dirty Word." So, a dirty word is about renunciation, and then "Don't Overdo It" is about the going to the extremes of renunciation or overdoing that, and this is uh, then kind of talking about the Buddha's middle way of neither indulging too much nor to dis- destructive asceticism, um, and and these extremes are well known to addicts, binging on the one end, and we could say anorexic, uh, literal, anorexic around, our bodies, but there can be other forms of kind of anorexic, and in some of the sex addiction programs, they talk about being anorexic, sort of a forced celibacy. Um, and so uh, always the challenge for people in recovery to find a balance, and we're sort of like, not well trained in that, and trying to figure out what it is, which is one of the things that we kind of use our sponsors for, right? We use the community to give us feedback. Like, does this seem like I'm going to some extreme? Am I overdoing it? Um, so I wanted to keep on with this section called "Don't Overdo It" because there were a couple pieces in here that I wanted to talk about, and this and to look at this poem by Kabir. You know, I don't really read poetry in my teaching much anymore, rarely, and it was something that more kind of did when I was trying to be fit into more of a typical Jack Kornfield style of teaching. That kind of uh, throw in a poem here and there, and I've just eventually I realized I'm not really that into poetry, um, but I do love Kabir, and oddly enough, I will mention that I have a grandnephew. I've been talking about my next generation folks lately. I have a grandnephew named Kabir. My niece Sarah is married to a Sikh named Mandeep, and so their first son is named Kabir, uh, and then their second son is named Seamus, which is, if you're familiar with Irish poetry, Seamus Heaney is a famous Irish poet. So I have a couple of grandnephew poets. We'll see. They're like 4 and 2 at this point, so I don't think they're writing a lot of poetry, but one never knows. In any case, little digression. And I also, just final digression, I also wrote a song based on Kabir, which is called Kabir Says, which is a line you'll hear in this poem. So if you're interested in hearing that, it's a great song, in my completely unbiased opinion. So let me read this uh, a poem because I think it points to something uh, that's really useful to explore. Friend, and I'll say that these are the Robert Bly versions of these poems, which probably are probably completely different from the original, but they're beautiful. Friend, please tell me what I can do about this world I hold to and keep spinning out. I gave up sewn clothes and wore a robe, but I noticed one day that the cloth was well woven. So I bought some burlap, but I still throw it elegantly over my left shoulder. I pulled back my sexual longings, and now I discover that I'm angry a lot. I gave up rage, and now I notice that I am greedy all day. I worked hard at dissolving the greed, and now I am proud of myself. When the mind wants to break its link with the world, it still holds on to one thing. Kabir says, listen, my friend, there are very few that find the path. So this idea, maybe I'll read the next part that I said about this. I will. Kabir shows how different forms of letting go can metamorphose into other forms of clinging, how physical renunciation doesn't necessarily transform the mind and heart. With Buddhist meditation, we keep watching the mind, noticing what appears there as we work with letting go. Am I developing peace or becoming more agitated? Am I dropping desire or simply changing its forms? As my experience deepens, is my pride growing too? Spiritual practices are not spirituality. Rituals and forms don't free the heart. Ideals and models of perfection can't awaken us. As we adopt a form of practice, we must watch carefully that it's working the way we intended. When we get sober, renouncing our destructive substance abuse, we have to be careful that we don't replace that behavior with another one. Many sober people become overworkers, overeaters, overexercisers, over meditators. We have to be careful that one form of letting go, sobriety, doesn't trigger another form of addictive behavior as a replacement. I was talking to someone this week that I'm working with, and he's very, I guess I would say, ambitious, spiritually ambitious, trying to really go for it in his spiritual practice. And he was like, "Well, if I meditate 8 hours every day, you think that would be I get enlightened faster that way?" And I was like, I think maybe you want to keep a little more balance than that. Um, it's interesting. I mean, I thought it was a really like classic kind of addictive thing because uh, it's like, oh, if 1 hour of meditating is good, then 8 hours must be better, right? And the truth is, it's not necessarily that meditation isn't the spiritual path. It's not the path. It's an aspect of the path. When you look at how Ajahn Chah, the great Thai forest master, trained his monks, he didn't let them meditate very much. They were out building buildings and uh, fixing up the roads and you know digging wells and things on there at the monastery. Um, and they're meditating and chanting, but it was really about, can I be mindful through all my activities? Um, so, uh, the the this idea that Kabir, it's kind of like you sense this kind of uh, chasing your own tail, in this poem. It's like, oh, well, I'll do this. No, I'll do this. This will fix it. This is the solution. And look, thinking that that there is some action I can take that's going to be the fix. Um, I'll read a little bit more. When I was about 4 years sober, a friend told me, you have to be careful you don't replace your old ideas with older ideas. He was referring to the 12th step suggestion that we let go of our old ideas, the ones that supported our addiction or alcoholism. The point is to find a new, healthier way of living. When he said older ideas, I realized I had the tendency to fall back on concepts from my rigid Catholic training. Sure, I'd stopped drinking and using and dropped the destructive and cynical thinking that went along with it. But had I now replaced those ideas with guilt and shame associated with earlier religious experiences. That really uh, stuck with me uh, because it is sort of, I think, a very common thing and it again is sort of emblematic of addicts. How we go from like the extremes of our one behavior on one hand. Now I'm going to be like super good. Now I'm going to be like pure. Give up all bad activities, anything that's associated with sin. And and it just turns into more repression and more suffering. And this is not uncommon in the recovery world. I mean, you I've told this story before, but I don't know if I've told it lately, and it's one that's really stayed with me. That it was soon after I got to Berkeley, and I was about 6 years sober when I moved up from LA to finish my degree at Cal, and I got in with a group of younger people. Um, who were very active in their recovery, and it was really great energy and fun, and I was going to a lot of meetings. But there was this kind of little pod of people, and they might have even been known as pod. And some of you may have been around or know about this. There was some sponsor was like, you know how there are sometimes these sponsors that get like kind of a following, right? And he had like this method, right? And it was like the 10th 10th 11th step method. And it was like, anytime you get agitated, stop, write inventory, and meditate, right? And let go of it right there and then, which is okay. That's kind of out of the big book. It's kind of sounds like the steps, makes sense. But I started to see how it got taken to an extreme, and particularly by this one very smart young woman who had like dropped out of high school, and she had managed to like get her GED and had gotten into Cal, and she's going to college. And she was she was overwhelmed a little bit with going to college, as one will be, when like especially if you dropped out of high school, which I did. So I know like that first shock of like going to school. And she was finding that she was getting agitated, like upset, like with the challenges of classes and going to, meeting professors and going from class to class and studying and all the stuff, and that she would have to stop and write inventory and meditate like repeatedly, to the point that she decided that she was going to drop out because the college was interfering with her working the steps. And I was like, "No, I think you're, like, missing the point of the steps now." Like, that's like, the steps aren't supposed to make you stop living your life so that you can attain some perfect step perfection, you know? They're meant to help you to live through the agitation. It's not like that there's something wrong with being anxious, or there's something wrong with, feeling nervous about class or feeling overwhelmed. There's nothing wrong with that. That's normal. We want to learn to be with that. Just like the our Buddhist practice teaches us to be with our feelings, not to, like, oh, I need to quickly meditate. Like I need to meditate 8 hours a day so that I don't have a feeling, right? Or that, that I have to be doing loving kindness constantly so that there's no anger in me. That would be terrible. We see how that kind of, and again, it's addicts, right? We take everything, we tend to take things to extremes. And, I just thought that was so sad, uh, and just such a, misunderstanding of what we're trying to do on this path and with this recovery process. It's not easy. It's challenging, and we're gonna, you know, chase our tail, and we're gonna get stuck, and that's okay as long as we, keep coming back to our primary intention. We don't drink or use no matter what, you know. We don't harm people as to the greatest best of our ability, Um, yeah, just interesting, don't overdo it. That's a good name for that section, this section of the book. Don't overdo it. I mean, that could just be the name of the program, of any of our program, the Don't Overdo It program, which even that, it's like, oh, I'm overdoing it. Oh no, I better stop because I'm not supposed to overdo it. It's like, no, that's okay. Like, it just means we try to come back. All right. You keep coming back. Of course, we're going to overdo it, I, I decided that, and this is a digression, and I don't know if it's even about this, but, I decided, this book, Living Kindness, which I've, you know, uh, it it's never sold well because it's not a recovery book. So when I put it out just as a self-published book, it didn't sort of take hold. And I realized, oh, I should have gotten like a Buddhist publisher to publish it. But after you've put something out, self-published, it's very hard to sell it to a publisher because they're like, well, you know, you already put it out. It's not a hit. So, um, but because I'm gonna do this interview on 10% happier about the book, I started like, maybe I can take another shot at that. And so, so I'm sort of creating a book proposal to send to Shambhala, and I got in touch with an editor there, and he's like, it's very unlikely, but you can send it. No, I said to my wife last night over dinner, well, I'm just on one of my quixotic, you know, journeys like with this book. I don't really expect anything to happen in it. And it's kind of like it's sort of a dumb thing to do. It's sort of a waste of time. I know it's probably not going to happen, but it's like, yeah, I'm going to do it anyway. And it's sort of, it's not an extreme, but it is in a way in that it's like, why are you doing that? What's the point? And I figured that if I could make it a literary illusion with my wife as an English professor, she would then forgive me for doing this stupid thing and wasting my time. Oh, well, yeah. And, I always used to say chaotic, but, we can debate that in the future. But my English professor at Cal said quixotic, so I don't know. Anyway, uh, yeah, it's okay, right, to do things, to go out on these chasing windmills, or was it tipping at windmills, uh, if we know we're doing that. Like, it's okay, it it would be a problem if I was like, oh my God, I've got to get this has to happen or I'll go crazy. No, I mean, yeah, we still go to sort of like do these nutty things at times, but we know to come back, to come back to what our center is and what we need to be doing to take care of ourselves. So, I don't know, is there more in this section I wanted to say? I don't think so. Um, I guess, the final thing I'll read here is after kind of seeing this attempt to sort of then uh, get to some kind of older idea where it was like, now I'm trying to be a good boy and sort of follow some archaic religious model. I say, I saw how difficult it is to be spiritually honest, to really shed my conditioned thoughts and actions and make decisions from a place of true freedom. Yeah. And that, I think, is, what we're trying to get clarity about in this process, in our process of letting go. Um, uh, yeah. So I'll leave it at that and see if there's any uh, thoughts or questions um, tonight that anybody wants to say. And you can unmute yourself, or you can just raise your proverbial hand, your Zoom hand. Anybody, anywhere?
Yeah, let me chime in here.
Yeah.
I
Hi,
have an
Becky.
old card, an old blue card, and on it there are the 4 absolutes:
Uh-huh.
absolute honesty, absolute unselfishness, absolute love, and absolute purity.
Yuck. Ooh.
I know, and I'm like, and that's old. It's an old card. I mean, this stuff's not on the card currently.
Huh.
But it also just reminds me of all those, the entirely
Yeah.
and the absolutely and that sort of language that permeates the big book and
Yeah.
that I kind of respond to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting thing that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, You respond to it? How do you respond to it? I mean, I know you're saying you
Well,
respond to it, like, emotionally, but
as an alcoholic, it strikes me as, the way I operate, just as you're saying,
yeah,
the mind of the extremist,
yeah.
and then sort of getting that,
Mhm.
getting that is the nature of this particular mind, and that it's just, uh, uh, yeah, it doesn't have to mean that I have to go after those absolutes,
Yeah.
just to recognize that it's familiar.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like such a potential place of pain if we're measuring ourselves in relation to those. That's, of course, the concern for me,
Right.
and because it's really hard. I mean, oh, I've been working with one person who's really, really struggling with his own feelings of, his conflicts between sort of one set of values and another, like, sort of behaviors and that are, n- it's questionable. The harm is questionable, but we get really stuck in there. It can be so painful, and I certainly go there, and I've been there, and the other version of that, the Buddhist version of that is, you know, am I doing what I should do in order to become enlightened? Am I practicing hard enough for my, and I kind of beat my head against that wall for a while, trying to let go of that.
It's just the mind.
Oh, well, sure. Thanks, Vicky. That's a lot of help.
I really take it seriously or what?
Yeah. Well, as Wes Nisker says, your mind has a mind of its own. So, uh, God.
This is a great topic because when I first got sober, I was afraid of giving away my edge, my personality, everything I liked about myself. And
Uh-huh. Right, right.
yeah,
Yes,
and
good.
maybe my creativity,
Yep,
my
yep, that too. Yes.
and I've been sober over 15 years now, and I've gone through so many self-help books, so much Buddhism, so many steps with sponsors, and with myself. I sponsored myself for a lot of years, and just took myself through the 4 step a lot, and I did the pod thing, with pissed off drunks, and
I didn't know
did a
that.
lot of 10 step work, and quickly, and I've tried to do it all just to find out I'm more confused than ever. I'm retired now, so I don't have that part of who I
More
am.
confused than
I'm
ever.
tired of finding purpose in my life
Yeah,
because that feels like that's like not even real anymore.
yeah.
I mean, and it's getting better. I finally, as I'm letting go of all this stuff and getting pissed off myself at the work that feels like it's so never ending and never
Yeah,
really achieving.
yeah.
I'm finding that is where I'm going to find it,
Mhm.
is letting it go.
Yeah. Yeah, self-help and trying to improve ourselves. God, like, what a journey that is. And yet, of course, uh, eh, I mean, since we've gotten ourselves into, a lot of trouble in our lives, most of us addicts, the sense that, oh, I shouldn't worry about, and, like, I shouldn't, like, try to make myself better. It's like, well, that seems risky, you know? So so I think it's, different times in our lives and different moments of our path demand different types of effort, right? There's a time to really work hard, where we really need to do a lot of deep work, and then we have to sort of see that, like, oh, yeah, it's not that I'm done. I mean, who's ever done? But that there's kind of like diminishing returns, or it just sort of stop. Like that's, it becomes just a habitual way of operating when it becomes a matter of now what we're doing is we are just never satisfied with ourselves, that we just like think that when we can't ever sort of rest and say, yeah, okay, you know, not perfect, but you know, there's that t-shirt. They sell it at Vajrapani, that for those of you who've been on retreat there. It just has a stick figure in a lotus posture, and it says in this like little kid script, "Good enough, dear." I love that T-shirt. A good enough, dear. Just good enough. Boy, but yeah, this is the middle way, and because good enough doesn't mean we just like, oh yeah, fine, I don't have to worry. Like I don't need to make amends or take inventory or work a program. No, I mean it's that's not what we're saying. So this is the challenge, right? This is the great challenge, the question of effort, and so much. I so often find myself coming back to this point, both in my own practice and in teaching, that finding the right effort in a given moment is a persistent challenge, and so this is why we have mindfulness, and this is why we have to that we can't use sort of take care of yesterday's problems today. We have to sort of be like present with what's happening now and what do I need now, and keep asking those questions. And part of the answers come from inside and some of them come from outside. And usually I think most of us, you know, when we find kind of balance or a middle way, we're kind of on that for a while, and then there's a drift, right? That sort of entropy. And then there's like, oh, wait, I've kind of lost my balance again. And then there's a kind of coming back. Where's my balance now? Where is my middle way now? Uh, the persistent question. So for me, it's not so much about having a standard of, oh, I should be like this, I should be good in these ways, and just check all those boxes every day, but rather asking myself each day, like, you know, what's happening? What is the need right now? What's going on that I'm challenged by? What in what way am I harming myself? What is the work that seems to be called for in this moment? Uh, and I think we all do want to have that, like, well, just give me the rules, and the, don't let the rules keep changing, but that's the reality, because everything is impermanent, and so the rules have to keep changing. And when you get the rules and just want to go by the rules, that's called fundamentalism. And that's the problem with fundamentalism, because there's no nuance to it. It doesn't address real experience. It addresses some imagined experience with a model of how we should be. And nobody can fit into that box. You force yourself into that box. And in one way or another, eventually that thing blows up, you know. Uh, and it's just not work. It's that fundamentalism doesn't work. The one size fits all. And this is again, like what I think is appealing about Buddhism, but also what's challenging about it, and what makes it less appealing in a sort of mass way, that because you can't market this one thing. I mean, I guess that's what mindfulness has become, sort of the mass marketing of, that's the fundamentalism of modern Buddhism, of what modern Western Buddhism is just be mindful, and good luck, that's not Buddhism. There's a lot that's left out in that term. Uh, Now I'm really ranting. So just noticing that, being mindful of my ranting. But that's when I get good, is when I get on a good rant. So, for those of you who love my rants. I hope somebody loves my rants. There are certain people who live in my household who don't love my rants all the time. So, well, dears, look, it's past 8 o'clock. And, you know, lovely to be here. Did anything happen around for Jacqueline? Did we help her out? Angela? Yeah? Good. Okay. And Jacqueline, if you need any, connections, like whatever, if there's a missed connection up there, let me know. So I kind of feel like I want to just is there one more voice that wants to speak? Okay.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I will speak.
Okay, great.
So the coincidences never cease to amaze me. Before the meeting started, I was thinking about when did I feel like my recovery and my Buddhist practice started to slip away in their, centralness to my way of being. And I looked back, and when I left the United States, I moved to a country in Central America that was very much fundamentalist, and there was very little 12-step recovery there. And what came to mind was I went back to those ways of being that were behind, like you said in what you were reading, we eliminate the surface level of how we acted, but then we drop back into what's behind that. So the attitudes and the judgments and those things from my early life in a parochial background came to the forefront because that's what was so much around me in my day-to-day life. And so it was very interesting to hear you speak to something that had automatically popped up for me 10 minutes earlier.
Wow.
And that helped a lot. So thank you.
Good. Thank you. That's really nice. Nice to hear that. I do, I'm glad that, something would resonate. I put these things out, and I guess, I try to find in my own experience and in the things that I observe, the things that seem to be sort of fundamental, well, not in fundamentalist, but like sort of universal-ish things. I don't like to say it's completely universal, but there seem to be a lot of things that we all share as addicts, or that we at least sort of are familiar with, and the places we get stuck. So nice to hang out. Anything up next weekend, right? I'll be teaching a half day uh, with New York Insight, and I think you can register for that. I'm pretty sure Angela might have even put up a link to it. She's nodding. Good job, Angela. Thank you, dear. And let's see. I think that's it for now. There were some problems. People had some problems getting on the Napa Valley Insight class, and I'm gonna talk to them about making sure. Gail, you had trouble getting on there. Yeah. It sounds like you have to sign up for their email list, and then they're supposed to email you, and some people didn't get the email. I'm not sure why they're sort of creating layers. I like to make things as easy and accessible as possible, and they haven't been recording the talks, which is also too bad. But anyway, so it goes. So I will be back here as usual on Tuesday morning, uh, assuming that all the karmic forces involved in my existence allow for that to arise. My plan and my intention, and that would be, in the traditional terms, God willing, is what that would be, another way of saying that. So I hope to see people then, and thank you.